Hello people. Today I have a special story for you from writer Aslinn Dragonhawk. The Mirror. Sadness, death, bad luck, they say, comes in threes. The Sansom family had such a string of bad luck. First, the crops suffered blight and a good third was lost. Then Pa died of some virus going around. Then Harris took his own life. Everyone sighed a breath of relief. Not that they wanted bad things to happen to the Sansoms, it was just that the bad luck would not hitch a ride or jump the fence to come and visit someone else. No one wanted to wish bad things on the Sansoms. They were good people, salt of the earth, God-fearing people. Pa Sansom was an elder of the church. Ma Sansom was the leader of the Ladies' Aid and the sewing circle. She could embroider something and make it look like a painting with all the tiny stitches and colours. Of course she don't sew much now. They say the thing that happened to Harris began with Jerusha Nixon. She was a pretty, spirited girl. Too spirited, most said. Ma never approved of her. She always said that red-headed, green-eyed baggage would break Harris's heart, and she was right, of course. He was a simple farm boy, and Jerusha's interest had waned. When Harris found her with one of the Vanata boys, he went out and got himself drunk, and just before dawn hung himself from the old oak tree in Johnson's pasture, just inside of Baysden Landing. Everyone came to the house. There would not be a proper wake, seeing as how Harris had killed himself, but they could go and be with the family. The Sansom lived in a lovely old Victorian farmhouse. It was a big house and still a beauty, though it needed some paint. They brought food and drink for the family, and some of the men went and dug the grave at the front of the yard, seeing as how Harris could not be buried in the churchyard and hallowed ground. There were covered dishes in the kitchen, and some of the women from the sewing circle came just to help serve and wash up afterwards. There would be no sewing on this evening. The menfolk would build a fire in the barnyard, in the big brush pit, and pass a jar of Carlton Prince's special favourite moonshine with the half a peach in the bottom of it. Voices were kept low, and there would be no singing. Inside the house the clocks were stopped, and the mirrors were covered in black shawls and lengths of black fabric. They stayed till late and ended the day of woe. Life goes on as it's wont to do, and the animals needed fed, the house cleaned, meals cooked, and clothes seen to. Ma Sansom was slow at first, but she eventually took the reins again from her daughters. Once again she was busy with the Ladies' Aid and the sewing circle. When spring finally came, the great cleaning was to be done. The daughters and some of their friends who wanted to make a little money came, and they would take the furniture out and clean the walls, take down the drapes and take up the rugs and clean the floors, wax them and move everything back in. Doors and windows would be opened to let in the fresh spring air and air out of the home from the winter months of wood fires, gas heat, cooking and being closed up. Brooms raised clouds of dust and water with caps of vinegar washed windows crystal clear, and floor wax was applied by women with rags on their hands and knees to shining perfection. No room was left untouched, except for Harris's room. Ma wanted to see to it herself. No one had been in Harris's room since he died, and it was an early summer day when Ma gathered up her broom and mop and bucket and cleaning rags and furniture polish and went upstairs. She set her things down by the door and went to the upstairs linen cabinet and got fresh sheets and pillow slips and went to the door and slipped her hand into her apron pocket, took out the skeleton key and opened the door. It was just as it had been that last day. She had come in that day and made up his bed and picked up, but he was a neat boy and it had never been a problem. Harris had the southern exposure, but the room was strangely cold. She went to the window and raised the shade, opened the window to let some of the warm air in and the sunshine. She looked around and saw the room. The bed in the centre of the front wall, the side tables, the lamps and the bureau on the side with his baseball bat leaned against it, and the closet door. On the back wall was that dresser that he loved, but just seemed so out of place. It was a long dresser with built-in jewellery boxes and lids and a large moon-shaped mirror. From it hung his 4F ribbons for the years he'd been in high school. To one side hung his high school diploma, and on the other side a couple of pictures. One of them a picture of him and his cousin Elmer and the deer he shot when he was 12. On the dresser were pictures of Grandpa and Grandma, who'd lived with them till they died. There was a linen runner embroidered by his sister Charlotte when she was 12, and on that rested his brush and comb. There was a small dish with a couple of pennies and nickel. She went to the bed and took off the patchwork quilt, one of his granny's that had been repaired with patches through the year. She folded it and laid it on the blanket box at the foot of the bed. She pulled off the sheets and put them in the wicker wash basket with a few pieces of clothes in it, waiting to be washed. There were a lot of clothes in the closet and the drawers waiting to be given to his brothers. Timmy and Elworth were the youngest boys. In fact, this fall it might be good to paint his room, move the furniture around and let one of the boys have it. They were sharing a room just now, and they were of an age where they needed their own space. Charlotte and her sister had had the chance when Granny died. Margrethe had moved into Granny's room that first spring after she died, and it made more peaceful living. She could make new curtains for the windows. She made up the bed and dug around in the blanket box and pulled out another blanket and spread it over the bed. She then took everything off the furniture and dusted and waxed the furniture. She opened the built-in jewellery boxes, and from them she extracted Harris's wristwatch and his pocket watch, which belonged to Grandpa. Then she put on her apron. There was a chain with a silver cross on it that he'd received when he was baptized, and that went into the pocket as well. There was the little black New Testament he'd gotten from the Gideons when he graduated high school. She added this to the other pocket. In the other box was a picture of that Jerusha Nixon in a pair of cut-off shorts and a bathing suit top, a long thin braid of red hair tied with a ribbon, and a small velvet box with a simple diamond ring she knew he'd planned to give her, and now never would. She put the braid, the picture, and even the ring in the trash basket, and when she was satisfied it was empty, she went into the closet and grabbed a couple of boxes and put his clothes in and set them in the hallway. The hanging clothes she would have one of the girls to go and get. She then swept the floor and the rug under the bed and the throw rug in front of the dresser. She changed her mind and decided to wait on the mopping. She'd mop and wax after they painted the room. She went to the window and closed it and drew the shade down. Again she noted the room was really quite cool, cooler than it should be. She looked around and remembered how Harris used to sleep all curled up tight like a cat in his bed, the blankets all around his head. "Lord, is my boy in heaven with you?" she said aloud. Suddenly the light of the room changed. Where the room had been dim, it became a strange orange-tinged colour. Ma spun around to see what had caused such a change. She turned and looked at the dresser. The mirror was filled not with the reflection of the room, but a strange, angry orange scene, and in the centre a figure seemed to be approaching. It grew larger, and she moved back until she could feel the edge of the bedbox on the back of her knees, and she sat down abruptly. The shape seemed to be looking at the frame of the mirror, and she watched with horror as the figure leaned out. That was when she recognized her boy, Harris. He laid his hands on the surface of the dresser and looked at her. "Mama, I'm in hell!" Her scream brought everyone to the house. She was in the hall looking into Harris's room. Her eldest boy looked at her. "Mama, you alright?" "In there! Look in there!" she said, pointing into the room. Dathan went in and looked around, then leaned toward the dresser. There were handprints burned into the top.